Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Tough Friends Collective podcast with me, Chelsea Gomez, also known as Oh, You're So Tough. If you're coming back for the second episode, thank you so much. Or if you're just finding us, thank you so much for tuning in. This podcast is all about real and authentic conversations about cancer, with many of the topics and submissions coming from my Instagram page called Oh, You're So Tough. So let's get into it. So Cancer is Confusing is an art series that I started on my Instagram page, Oh You're So Tough, maybe like 6 months, maybe it's longer. And I started this Instagram series because I just had a lot of confusing thoughts about cancer and surviving cancer and going through it that, I don't know, I just needed to get them out of my head and onto a canvas of sorts. And I was really honestly nervous when I shared the first Cancer is Confusing series of like drawings and thoughts, because some of them you think are so far out there that nobody would understand. And the reality is that they're actually really common thoughts that a lot of us have. But we need to normalize these sorts of thoughts so we don't feel so alone with them. I mean, because I even had those same thoughts like, oh, I hope people don't think I'm weird. Someone listening to this who's never had cancer probably can't relate, but I hope that if you are listening from outside of the cancer community, this can give you a better insight into some of the feelings that we have surrounding cancer. So I went through and I looked in my submission history for Cancer is Confusing, and I found a couple submissions that I think were not shared on my page. I'm pretty sure these ones are ones that I just couldn't fit in the actual 10 slides. Now they've upped it to 20 slides, so yay. The main topic we will be exploring on this episode and around Cancer is Confusing is survivorship. And survivorship in cancer can really feel like you're out on a boat somewhere and it's sinking and everyone is driving by going like, hey, great job. And you're like floating around in the ocean and there's sharks circling you and everyone's just like, you're real strong, you're an inspiration. And you're just like, why is nobody freaking out that I'm in the ocean with sharks right now? Why is nobody else saying that? So that's a lot of how surviving cancer can feel. So a lot of these submissions are around that topic, and we will discuss them in more detail. Before we get into this topic, I do want to say there are plenty of people in the cancer world who don't get to move into this phase of survivorship, whether they have chronic cancer, metastatic disease, etc. They are on treatment forever, basically. And so I just want to stop to acknowledge those people and hold space for people who do have that reality. And there are different, circumstances and challenges that come with that. And I hope to have some guests on. As soon as I get all the guest stuff figured out, I'll have some guests on to kind of talk about that perspective, because I think that perspective in particular is not heard enough in the cancer community. And so I just wanted to say that before we get into it. And a really quick shameless ask of you, if you do enjoy my podcast, I would greatly appreciate it if you could rate it and give it a good comment, some stars. That would be great. I am trying to build this up, so any support you can give me, I truly do appreciate. So our first Cancer is Confusing submission is, how am I supposed to trust my body again after it allowed cancer to grow? It's so hard to trust myself. I 100% relate to this. So I had blood cancer, Hodgkin's, and basically it starts not only like in your blood, but it is in your lymph nodes is the big thing. Like your lymph nodes swell and it's lymphoma. So lymph nodes, if you didn't know, are supposed to actually protect you from illness, and mine just mutated and tried to kill me. So that was really special of them. So I remember like my first ever design for my brand was my lymph nodes are a-holes, because that's how I felt. Like, they're not nice to me. They don't try to do anything nice for me. They just try to take me out. That's a humorous take on what the submission is saying. It's like, how do you trust your body and how do you start to heal and move on when your body is essentially the scene of the crime in a way? How are you supposed to stay in this traumatic place and heal? Because if you think about it, when one goes through like a traumatic event, whether, I don't want to go into what they could be, but a traumatic event, a lot of times the person who goes through it is not subject to staying in that particular situation or place to heal, if that makes sense. Most people who are starting their healing journey, I don't like that word, but journey on anything can normally move away from that situation or get some distance. And with cancer, you can't go anywhere. Like, it's literally your own body. You're trapped. So essentially what you're dealing with is a betrayal of trust of your own body. Like, most of us, know we should eat better or drink more water or whatever. But when it comes to this, it's like, no matter what you were doing prior to getting cancer, whether it be you were a 5K runner or you were a couch potato, it doesn't really matter. Cancer doesn't discriminate. And so it can feel really, like I said, a betrayal of trust. Also, it did start raining here in lovely Florida. So if you hear rain sounds in the back, just regard those as aesthetic additions. I don't know if you can hear it, but if you do, that's what it is. Another piece of this, trying to heal in the crime scene essentially is that, you feel a loss of control. When you get diagnosed with cancer, so much of your life is now out of your control, whether it's like show up to this appointment here, get this surgery, you need this treatment, et cetera, et cetera. Like, so much of your life is now out of your hands. You have to do these things that the doctors are saying, or else, may not survive. You have to put yourself through so much that you don't want to, especially like when you're in active chemotherapy treatment plans. Like, I know for me, I was going every 2 weeks. I had blood work 1 week, chemo the next week, and I had basically no breaks of being a cancer patient. So that loss of control, especially going from somebody who was working all the time before that, like, not to say that that was healthy, the schedule I was working, but I was an independent, free person the day before I got cancer. And then the day after, I'm like floating out in outer space, it seemed like. Another aspect of this mistrust of one's body is the fear of recurrence. When you become in remission, if you are able to be in remission, like I said, not everyone does get that ability because of their particular type of cancer. However, if you are in remission, I will say that most of us spend a lot of time thinking about not being in remission. Like, will it come back? Because you've already been betrayed one time by your body, it's like easy to jump to the fact that it could just happen again. And it's so scary. And learning how to rebuild and actually like feel safe to plan for the future is so hard. And the whole recurrence issue can really take over your life. It can really haunt you. I know for me, I was struggling really bad with this. My cancer did come back, but it was almost like a weird, sickening sense of relief. Like, not that I wanted cancer again, absolutely not. But it was like I was being chased by a monster constantly and like looking over my shoulder and just being anxious and researching things and going in Facebook groups and seeing what happened with other people, what were their symptoms. Maybe my leg itching isn't a bug bite, it's the Hodgkin's, et cetera, et cetera. So when it came back, it was like, okay, I can rest. Okay, it came back, I can rest. Yes, I have to do more, but like at least I can stop looking over my shoulder every second of the day. That's a really weird and cancer is confusing thought. And I remember drawing a little picture where it was like a monster was chasing me, and finally when it ate me, I was like, so I draw Puff characters, or little puffs, you can see them on my Instagram, but it was like Puff was inside of the monster's mouth and he was just finally calm because it caught you. I'm sure some of you out there relate to what I'm saying. I hope that for all of us, knock on wood, we don't have any types of cancer relapses, but the reality is that it does happen quite often, and it's scary, and it's one of the scariest things, I think, for many of us in survivorship. So another submission that I received on this topic was, when you get declared NED, which is no evidence of disease, which means basically you're in remission, but the side effects persist. Many people outside of this community think, oh, you're in remission, you're done with treatment, oh, you're good, like move on down the road. Well, it ain't that easy. Number one, the psychological effects, like we've just been talking about, the long-term trauma, mistrust of your body, being lost, not knowing what to do next. But then, like this person is saying, side effects from treatment can be, and most often are, long-term, if not lifelong. So for me, I am in menopause now. I had a stem cell transplant, put me in menopause, has completely changed my body, my life in so many ways, and not something I can just like skip on down the road and forget about. Like, this is a major change, and there's people who have many different long-term physical side effects from treatment, and that's not talked about enough. Most like movies about cancer or TV shows about cancer, they have the person finishing treatment, ringing the bell, and then skipping on down the road. And that is just not the case. There are appointments you have to go to, scans you have to get, long-term side effects you have to monitor, chronic fatigue, chemo brain, etc. Like, chemo brain for me is one of the worst side effects that I have dealt with long-term. I can 110% see a difference between my brain functioning prior to cancer and after all of the chemos, the treatments, the stress, the PTSD, everything. There is a marked difference. And for me, I was able to, this is not medical advice, please contact your doctor to discuss. I'm just giving my personal experience. So I just want to preface that. So for me, I did end up getting diagnosed with ADHD. I've clearly had it my whole life, but never got diagnosed with it. And I was able to cope with it pretty well. I mean, we'll say well in parentheses, well, or quotation, well. Honestly, I wonder like how much more I could have done in my life. I mean, I was an overachiever type person, but it was a lot of work to overachieve. So I just wonder like what would have happened if I had known I had ADHD and had gotten on meds early on in my life. Like, wow. So for me, anyways, my point is I was diagnosed with ADHD after chemo. It had basically ramped up to 1,000 and I could no longer just deal with it. So I know a couple different people too who have been put on ADHD meds. I don't know that they necessarily have ADHD, but they've gotten it for chronic fatigue and brain fog. So that's a conversation you can have with your own doctor, your own psychiatrist, whomever, but it is something to look into if you are having major issues with your cognitive functioning post-treatment. So for everyone listening who's outside the community, thank you for being here, number one, but just also know that people need your grace. Please don't automatically assume that the person in your life with cancer is 100% better, healed, ready to move on, should never talk about cancer again, etc., etc. Please give them grace, allow them space to process, to heal. And part of that is talking about all of the crap that cancer leaves you with, and leave space for that. And don't just say, oh, well, it's time for you to move on. Don't focus on it. You can't just tell someone not to focus on something like this. Like, this traumatic event in someone's life, it's not just something you're going to just say, oh, you know what, Sally, you're so right. I'm just going to cancer who? Like I told you in the last episode, I tried that and it does not work. The next submission I want to read says, when people think you're all better now, but your body hurts and you just want to stay in bed and eat snacks. That's very similar to what we've been talking about, people's assumptions that just because the treatment is over or you've rang the bell or been told that the cancer is in remission, that you could just skip on down the road. But many of these side effects or long-term issues are invisible. And you know how society is with thinking like, oh, you don't look sick or you don't look like you're having a hard time. Well, there is no one look on having a hard time or being sick. So let's throw that out the window. And I completely relate to this feeling of like just wanting to sit and eat snacks. So many people put a lot of pressure on cancer survivors, especially to make something grand of their experience with this disease. Like, are you going to go climb Mount Everest now? Are you going to go and find the next cure for cancer? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? What do you want to do? And the reality is, most of us just want to sit on the couch and eat snacks. When you're in the active treatment life, it's just so overwhelming and you barely have time to think. You don't really have time to process what's happening. It's kind of like fight or flight mode. And so many of us, especially in America, have to rush back to work when we're better, or even work through treatment, even if we don't want to. And so I totally relate to, like, after I finished, especially my transplant, I was like, there is no way. I don't want to go back to that place. I don't want to see those people. No offense to them, but I am so tired and sick of being told what to do. And I just don't want to do anything right now. I just want to chill. I just want to catch my breath and figure out what I'm doing next. And that is a completely valid feeling. And I think that we'll talk more in another episode about the desire to kind of change your entire life after cancer. It can really be strong, and it can affect people of all different ages and professions. Like, even if you studied years and years and years and years to be in the job that you were in before your cancer came, I know a lot of people who are like, you know what? I'm not feeling that anymore. I don't want to go back to being a doctor or whatever it is. Like, legitimately, this happens a lot. And so we'll talk about that in another episode. So the last submission I want to read today is, in remission and carrying the weight of grief around and you don't know why. Let's talk about a few sources of grief post-treatment. We've gone over some of them in this podcast already, but just to touch on a few things that you might be feeling. Number one, I had a lot of grief for the person who I thought I was before cancer. And I say it that way because for a long time, I had this idea that the person that I was died. Like, the person I was before cancer is gone. She's not coming back. I just need to accept that, need to figure out who I am now, etc. And I held that belief for a long time. I mean, I've said it probably in other interviews I've done. I've said it in papers. I've said it a lot. And it wasn't until I read, I can't remember the book name, but I read this book about PTSD, and something in it, I don't even recall the exact quote, but something in it made me realize that the person I am, she didn't go anywhere. And she didn't go anywhere because of cancer. The person who I really am was gone like a long time ago. She was gone when people said I was too much as a kid, or I should stop doing this, or I should be this way, or I should like this sort of thing, or I should do this for a career, or that's not appropriate, or nobody can make money doing that, or, you know, just so many things that the world tells you. I always say now, like, I am more me now than I was before I had cancer, because I was fed into what everyone else tells you should be. And now I'm finally rediscovering who I am inside, and that is the true me. The little kid who liked to do art, the little kid who liked to help people. Like, I still had those aspects of myself, but they were being buried. Like, I like to help people, but I was trying to do it at some corporate job. Like, no. And I was trying to be creative, but then all it was doing a PowerPoint, you know, and so much of myself I discovered post-cancer, and that was through therapy, through talking about these sorts of things with people in my community, and feeling seen and being able to move on from a lot of these feelings. I mean, not move on, but accept them. And so I challenge you, if you are feeling this way, it's completely and totally valid to feel like you're grieving. Basically, what I say is you're grieving your own death while you're still alive. Talk about cancer is confusing, but I want to challenge you to think about what you really want in life. I know you can't just most of the time just up and leave your career, your job, like we talked about, but you can think about who you used to be, who you were as a kid, what kind of things you like to do. Did you like to go outside and hunt for shells on the beach? Did you like to make art? Did you like to look at cars? It doesn't matter. Hone in on who you are and what you really want. And I feel like once you connect to like that inner child and start healing that inner child, it really, really helps in healing this part of you that feels like you lost who you used to be. So let's talk about 2 other reasons why one could be feeling this way. The next one is the effect on your relationships. And this can be a significant other, this can be friends, this can be family. But cancer takes a big toll on you and the people in your life. And so we talked about this briefly in the last episode, but it's shameful. It carries guilt. It shouldn't, because it's not our fault, but it does. That's the reality. And so some guilt that you could be feeling is that you feel like, I've changed, my family's life. My friends don't react to me the same way. People at work look at me a certain way. It could just feel like you are an alien in a world that you just don't fit in with anymore. I know so many people who, honestly, their friends now are the ones that are in this community, because you don't have to sit there and explain how you're feeling. The people just get it. And when you try to hang out with people who haven't gone through these really profound experiences, it can feel kind of empty and that you don't relate to them. And I want to tell you that that's okay. That's not your fault. And it is something that is normal. It doesn't mean that you can't ever have your friends that are not in this community, because definitely you can. I'm just trying to show you that you can just feel really different, especially around the same existence, the same people, the same places. You can just feel like you don't fit there anymore. And the last one I want to discuss just briefly, because I feel like so many of the topics we talk about today could be a separate episode in itself, but survivor's guilt is a big thing in this community, especially for people who do make friends within this community. So survivor's guilt is, just to define it a bit, is when you feel guilty for being alive, having survived, when your friends or maybe even family did not survive. And this can happen not only in cancer, but in many different traumatic situations. But especially in cancer, the reality is there is a lot of loss that comes with being in this community. And it's hard to deal with, especially when you sit there and go like, why did I deserve to have this chance and my friend didn't? I think it's about 2 years ago now, I lost one of my really closest cancer friends named Katie, and it really messed with me. It did. And I just didn't understand why she wasn't given the same chance to continue to exist and live. And she was so vibrant and lovely and an amazing human being. And I was just so angry and sad. And I really came to the conclusion after, therapy and things, that I know Katie wouldn't want me to exist in that place of feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be here. She would be like, no, you do deserve to be here. I want you to be here. I'm cheering for you. I'm your friend. I love you. But knowing that even really it still hurts when I think about all my friends that I've lost and continue to lose. And I just do my best to continue to make differences, or try to make differences within this community, to make their stories count, make something positive out of these experiences. And it's hard. I mean, it's not all, cancer ain't all positive rainbows and glitter. It just ain't. And so it's heavy. It's heavy. And if you're experiencing survivor's guilt, again, I just want to validate those feelings and tell you that, like Katie, your friends wouldn't want you to beat yourself up for being here. They love you. And just think about it, if you were the one looking down on them from wherever they are, would you want them to feel bad and stuck and like they don't deserve to be there? No, you wouldn't. Okay, so that was a kind of a heavier episode, but I mean, I think that these conversations are really important to have, and I hope that a lot of these different topics resonated with you, and I hope that you got something helpful out of them. A lot of different people are asking about being a guest on this podcast, and eventually I am going to have guests, and I'll set up a Google form with all that info on it, and I'll share it on my Instagram page. And yeah, so that's coming. Be patient with me. If you could please give me a nice rating on all the places, I would greatly appreciate you. Subscribe, share with your friends. Yeah, I'm really excited for the future of this, and I really find it fun to get to talk to you all in a new and different way. So thank you for tuning into the Tough Friends Collective episode number 2, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone.